The warship Colossus Fawn hung in orbit like a carrion bird over the smoldering ruins of the human colony below. From the command dais, Admiral Theroin watched the surface scans flicker across his screens. Fires, collapsing biospheres, pockets of human life reduced to little more than static. He leaned back, bored more than triumphant. Victories like this no longer thrilled him. They were too easy. Another nest of primates broken, one of his officers muttered, almost lazily. The bridge crew laughed, a dry, collective sound with no joy behind it. Theroin flexed his talons over the armrest. They never learn. Always pleading. Always fragile. You'd think after losing a dozen colonies they would at least harden their defenses. His second-in-command, Captain Veyrak, tilted his angular head, frills twitching in mild disdain. Perhaps this is their strength. They surrender their children instead of bleeding for them. Efficient in its way. Efficient cowardice, Theroin corrected. His voice cut sharp through the chamber, but his gaze remained on the stars. To him, humanity was less an enemy and more a tedious chore, an infestation that required extermination in increments. The fleet had drifted to what the humans called the Mercy Corridor, a supposedly neutral zone where medical transports moved without escort. Intelligence had flagged a target, a massive white-hulled ship named Mercy Dawn, carrying wounded soldiers, doctors, and civilians evacuated from the warfront. Perfect prey. No defenses worth mentioning, no escort larger than patrol frigates. Theroin's crew buzzed with interest for the first time in weeks. A hospital ship, one officer said, grin curling. Imagine the message that will send. Veyrak gave a short, cruel laugh. We'll see their desperation. Imagine their children watching the medics who promised safety reduced to atoms. A clean strike at morale. Theroin closed his eyes briefly, savoring the thought. Not because it was a masterstroke of strategy, far from it. No, this would simply be a spectacle. Something to jolt him out of the monotony of one-sided war. Signal the fleet, he ordered softly. Target the Mercy Dawn. Leave nothing but wreckage. The stars bloomed with light as alien lances of energy cut across the void. The escorts, barely more than police cutters, tried valiantly to shield the hospital ship. They were obliterated within minutes, their wreckage spinning silently into the abyss. The Mercy Dawn broadcast frantic signals across every known frequency, automated distress codes repeating in dozens of galactic dialects. Medical vessel, unarmed, non-combatant, the messages screamed into the dark. Theroin leaned forward as the great hull split open under his fleet's fire. White paint-blistered emergency pods launched and were picked off methodically by gunship fire. His face did not change, but something in the pit of his stomach twisted in a way he did not examine. The screams on the comm channels crackled, then vanished one by one. When silence returned, it was almost obscene. The Mercy Dawn was gone. A ship built to heal, carrying thousands of lives, erased as if it had never existed. Theroin finally rose. His voice, low and resonant, carried across the bridge. Transmit this recording to the nearest human relay. Let Earth see what happens when their spawn defy the Dominion. There was a ripple of assent, and for a moment the bridge felt alive with cruel satisfaction. But Veyrak studied his admiral's profile and detected something else beneath the calm mask. You are unsettled, the captain murmured when the others were distracted. Theroin's eyes flicked to him. I am irritated. We waste fuel, munitions, and time on vermin. This is not war. It is slaughter. And yet you ordered it. Yes. Theroin's gaze returned to the void, his frills tight against his skull. Because slaughter is what they understand. On the other side of that void, Earth Command received the transmission. The recording of the Mercy Dawn's destruction played in silence across secure rooms buried beneath kilometers of rock. Generals and admirals sat without moving, faces carved from stone. No one spoke of retaliation immediately. No one raised their voice. The silence itself was more terrible than rage. Admiral Cade Rourke stood apart from the table, watching the final transmission, a nurse clutching a child in her arms as the hull buckled. Static devoured the image. Rourke's jaw tightened, but he gave no outward sign of grief. He had seen death enough times to make steel of his face. Casualties, he asked finally. The aide's voice was thin. 17,000. Mostly civilians. The room absorbed the number. Still no one moved. Rourke looked across his peers, then down at his folded hands. We warned them, he said quietly. We placed every code, every marker of sanctuary. They chose this. One of the younger generals slammed a fist onto the table. Then we answer. Strike their frontier worlds, burn their fleets. Rourke cut him off without raising his voice. No, we do not lash out. Not yet. His calm was ice, chilling the room more than fury could have. He knew the weight of what was coming. The Dominion had made a mistake, not in the tactic, but in the target. A hospital ship was not simply another vessel. It was a symbol, and symbols carried consequences. He leaned forward, voice measured, each word precise. We prepare. Quietly, thoroughly. When we respond, it will not be vengeance. It will be the end of this farce they call war. The others looked at him, some pale, some nodding grimly. Outside the secure bunker, life continued as if the world had not changed. Inside, a decision hardened like iron. In orbit above the ruins of the Mercy Dawn, Admiral Theroin sat alone in his chambers. The silence pressed heavier than before. He had thought himself immune to doubt, a creature forged by victory. But as he closed his eyes, the image of the white-hulled ship splitting apart lingered. Not in triumph, but in warning. For the first time, he wondered, not aloud, not where anyone could hear, whether the humans were truly prey, or if they were simply patient predators waiting for the right moment to bare their teeth. And far below, on Earth, that moment was already being planned. The Dominion expected outrage, a futile show of human vengeance that could be crushed in open battle. Instead, silence stretched across the stars. No angry declarations, no grand fleets rushing to defend distant colonies. Merchant convoys ceased suddenly. Civilian traffic vanished from known lanes. Outlying settlements dimmed their signals until they might as well have been lifeless rocks. What the aliens mistook for fear was something else entirely, though they lacked the imagination to name it. Admiral Theroin sat hunched in the command throne of the Colossus Fong, talons drumming a restless rhythm. Reports came in uneven waves, missing patrols, intercepted relays that carried nothing but white noise. His officers tried to interpret the pattern as cowardice, a species cowering behind its homeworld. But Theroin's instincts told him it was something colder, sharper. Why abandon resource colonies? Veyrak muttered, scrolling through a fleet-wide status display. If they are running, it should be toward supply, not away from it. Yet they stripped their own holdings bare. They are baiting us, Theroin said flatly. The words landed like stones on the deck. Several officers glanced up, uncertain whether he was serious. Bait? With what? Veyrak's laugh was brittle. We've dissected their ships. Primitive drives. Weapons that require manual firing sequences. Even their largest cruisers are decades behind our second lines. Theroin didn't answer immediately. His eyes fixed on the holomap, watching empty human sectors bloom like black holes. Absence could be more dangerous than presence. He had learned that on other fronts long ago. Elsewhere in the hidden caverns of Earth Command, Admiral Cade Rourke walked the length of a dimly lit war room, boots echoing against steel. He paused before a massive wall display, sectors of space marked with faint red glows, each representing Dominion deployments. His staff worked in near silence, the usual chatter of officers replaced with a kind of reverent focus. The destruction of the Mercy Dawn hung over them like a second gravity, heavy but clarifying. Rourke stopped before a young strategist, Lieutenant Arya Calder, who had been coordinating the withdrawal patterns. She looked exhausted, her eyes red, but she stood straight as he approached. You've mapped their advances against our retreat lines, Rourke said. Show me the overlap. Arya keyed in commands. The projection shifted. Lines of Dominion movements crossed areas that once pulsed with civilian life. Now they were hollow, intentionally so. The enemy's deployments looked aggressive, but to anyone watching closely, they were chasing ghosts. They think we're running, Arya murmured. Rourke studied her, noting the tremor in her hands. And are you running, Lieutenant? Her jaw clenched. No, sir. I'm angry. Good, Rourke said softly. Anger sharpens. Fear dulls. He turned back to the display. Let them think us broken. It makes the knife slide easier when the time comes. At that same moment, far across the void, Theroin received a new transmission. His intelligence core had finally pieced together scattered reports, 3 Dominion patrols destroyed without distress calls, their wreckage located only after drifting for days. The precision of the strikes was unsettling. Not chaotic, not desperate surgical. He dismissed the officers who clamored for explanations. When the chamber cleared, he remained with Veyrak alone. They should not be able to do this, Veyrak whispered. Our scouts outnumber theirs 100-fold. We have faster drives, heavier guns. Theroin's throat rasped with something between amusement and unease. We believed their colonies were weak. Yet every one we struck was strangely underdefended, as if they wanted us to burn them. And now these losses. He tapped the data slate. No broadcasts. No warnings. Just silence before death. That is not the work of prey. Veyrak's frills flattened. He dared not voice his next thought, but Theroin saw it anyway. If humans had been planning this, if every retreat was calculated, then the Dominion had not been hunting at all. They had been herded. Back on Earth, the War Council convened in the subterranean chamber. Rourke let the voices rise around him, debates of fleet positioning, supply logistics, the ethics of retaliatory strikes. He allowed it until the noise threatened to drown the room, then raised a single hand. Silence fell with immediate obedience. "They think we grieve," Rourke said. His voice carried none of the fire that the younger commanders seemed to crave. It was calm, almost conversational, and therefore far more dangerous. "They think the Mercy Dawn broke us. What they fail to grasp is that they struck the one vessel that could unify a divided Earth. We are no longer nations, no longer committees. We are one will." He gestured to the projection. Wormhole nodes flared to life in the model, hidden conduits that had been kept secret for decades. Only a handful of the officers had known of them. Gasps rippled through the chamber. "Our fleets have waited in silence. Our technology has waited in shadow. We offered peace. They chose spectacle. Now we show them what patience earns." Even Arya, hardened by the loss of friends aboard the Mercy Dawn, felt a shiver at the revelation. Humanity had not merely survived, it had prepared, quietly, relentlessly, for the day patience ended. Meanwhile, Theroin's growing unease sharpened when a report arrived from the frontier. Entire Dominion supply depots had been destroyed in simultaneous attacks. No survivors. No distress calls. Only fragments of blackened hulls drifting where fuel and munitions should have been stockpiled. He summoned his officers again. This time his voice held no trace of boredom. "We are not hunters in this theater," he said. "We are quarry. The humans are not reacting. They are executing." "Impossible," one commander barked. "Their fleets are where they want to be, not where we expect," Theroin cut in. "Do you not see it? Every strike we believed decisive was permitted. Every world we burned was abandoned with deliberate haste. They are bleeding us in silence." The officers exchanged uncertain glances. Dominion doctrine had no language for this kind of warfare. Theroin dismissed them with a harsh gesture, then turned inward. For the first time in his long career, he felt the first prick of genuine fear. Not fear of defeat, but fear of having underestimated an enemy so completely that his empire's arrogance might already have doomed it. On Earth, Rourke ended the council with only one order. His tone was calm, final. "Prepare the fleets. Do not announce. Do not broadcast. When the signal comes, we strike, not for vengeance, but for permanence." The chamber emptied slowly, but Arya lingered at his side. Her voice was hesitant. "Sir, will it be enough? Can we really turn the tide?" Rourke looked at her, his eyes haunted but steady. "We don't need to turn the tide, Lieutenant. We are the tide. They just haven't realized it yet." Above his flagship, Theroin stared out into the dark and wondered, for the first time in his life, whether silence might kill faster than fire. Admiral Theroin had not known silence could feel like suffocation. His flagship's bridge was a place of constant data streams, of chatter from tactical officers and navigators, yet the sound barely touched him. Every word from his subordinates carried the same undertone, unease, brittle and spreading. Losses continued to arrive without explanation, scouting groups vanishing whole, outposts turned to ash with no attackers witnessed. It was a war without spectacle, without pattern, and it gnawed at him. He found himself alone in his private chamber, watching fragments of intercepted human transmissions replay again and again. Images of ancient wars from Earth's own archives, trench lines dissolving under fire, mushroom clouds boiling across horizons, cities razed and rebuilt only to be razed again. The humans had cataloged their own savagery with an almost obsessive precision. He studied them not as curiosities but as warnings. Each age showed a people who should have broken, yet each time they clawed forward. Even the self-inflicted wounds seemed to strengthen their resolve. Veyrak entered quietly, perhaps sensing his admiral's mood. "You seek to understand prey that does not deserve understanding," the captain said carefully. Theroin did not turn. His gaze remained on the flickering image of a battlefield littered with human dead, soldiers dragging themselves upright with limbs barely attached. They have drowned themselves in war for millennia and call it history. Tell me, Veyrak, what kind of creature survives this and still finds ways to reach the stars? The captain hesitated, frills pulling tight against his skull. One that does not fear suffering, perhaps. But suffering is not strategy. Our fleets still outnumber theirs. Theroin finally faced him. Numbers mean nothing against an enemy who bends the rules of war. They erase us without announcing themselves. They withhold even their anger. Do you not feel it? They are not fighting to win battles. They are fighting to end them. Across the Dominion's capital, a council convened. The chamber rose in tiers of polished obsidian, echoing with voices that carried more arrogance than certainty. Lords and admirals argued over the latest reports, losses mounting, colonies silent, civilians restless. Some dismissed the evidence as anomalies, sabotage from within, exaggerated human propaganda. Others spoke with quiet dread of a strategy too disciplined to be chance. When Theroin was summoned to speak, he strode into the hall with the weight of every erased patrol behind him. His voice was low, deliberate, each syllable pressed like a blade. We believed we were the hunters. We believed humanity primitive. Yet our fleets return in fragments, and their worlds, those we burned, yielded nothing but hollow triumphs. They lured us in. They study us even now. Laughter rippled from the denialists, sharp and dismissive. One lord leaned forward, sneering. You claim they baited us? That these animals possess foresight beyond our empire? Admiral, you grow fearful. Theroin's jaw tightened, but he did not shout. Fear is rational when one faces an abyss. And humanity is an abyss. They have no bottom. The council broke into clamor, factions pulling apart like fractured glass. Some demanded escalation, the full weight of the Dominion thrown against Earth before the humans could reveal more. Others whispered of retreat, of consolidating borders until the truth became clear. Theroin's warning, rather than unify them, only deepened the cracks. When the session ended, he walked alone from the chamber, Veyrak at his side. They will not listen, Veyrak murmured. No, Theroin said quietly. They will continue as they always have, believing themselves unassailable until the knife is already buried in their chest. On Earth, Admiral Rourke observed the ripples of alien politics with an expression carved from ice. Intelligence intercepted through compromised Dominion channels confirmed the fractures Theroin had witnessed. Some voices called humans insects, others monsters. The division itself was the victory. Rourke did not gloat, but in the privacy of his office, he allowed himself a long exhale. The plan, so far, held. Lieutenant Calder entered, carrying reports of relief efforts on fringe settlements reclaimed from Dominion control. She hesitated before handing them over. Sir, some of our medics are treating alien civilians. The Dominion abandoned them when they withdrew. It's complicated. Rourke scanned the report, noting images of human doctors bent over alien children, feeding them, stitching wounds closed. His eyes softened for the briefest moment. It should be complicated, he said. If it were simple, we would already be what they think we are. Calder frowned, confusion shadowing her features. Shouldn't we hate them? After what they did to the Mercy Dawn. He closed the file, meeting her gaze with a steadiness that carried both weariness and conviction. Hate is a luxury. We are surgeons, Lieutenant. Our task is to cut away what threatens survival, not drown ourselves in poison. Remember that. She nodded, but the tremor in her jaw betrayed her turmoil. Compassion warred with rage inside her, just as it did in countless others. Yet Rourke knew that restraint, not fury, would define the war's outcome. Meanwhile, Theroin returned to his flagship burdened by doubt. He stood once more before the records of human wars, forcing himself to watch until the images burned into his mind. Armies charging into hopeless odds, civilians digging through rubble only to rise again, cities rebuilt with defiance etched into every stone. The humans carried survival in their marrow, and he, an admiral of the Dominion, was the first among his people to admit he feared what that meant. Veyrak watched him in silence before asking, "What will you do when the council ignores you again?" Theroin's answer came slowly, his eyes never leaving the glowing screen. "What I must. Even if it means betraying every certainty I was raised to believe. I will not walk blind into their jaws." Far away, Rourke stood before his own display, a map of the stars slowly shifting as hidden fleets repositioned. His voice, spoken only to himself, was calm, resolute. They thought mercy was weakness. They will learn it is choice. Both men, human and alien, knew the storm was gathering. One felt dread, the other grim determination, but neither could yet see how close the edge of collapse truly was. The Dominion assembled its largest fleet in centuries, a constellation of warships blotting out the stars above their fortress world. To its lords, it was proof of strength, a promise that no enemy could match the Empire's sheer weight of metal and firepower. To Admiral Theruin, it looked like a funeral procession waiting to begin. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, eyes sweeping the endless formation, and knew it would not be enough. Numbers had comforted his peers, experience whispered otherwise. Veyrak's voice carried uneasily at his side. They come soon. We will crush them by presence alone. Theruin shook his head. Presence means nothing to an enemy who has mastered absence. His frills lay flat against his skull, the sign of an instinct he could no longer deny. He could almost feel the humans watching, poised just beyond perception, waiting for the perfect cut. Across the void, Admiral Rourke stood in Earth's command vessel, surrounded by silence. No cheers, no bluster. His officers moved with mechanical precision, eyes on instruments, voices low. The time for preparation had ended. Now came the execution of patience. He gave a single nod, and across space, dormant wormhole gates flickered alive. For the Dominion, the attack came like a collapse of reality. Wormholes bloomed inside their perimeter, human warships spilling forth as if birthed from nothing. They did not announce themselves with salvos or grand speeches. They simply struck, one target after another, surgical and merciless. Ammunition depots detonated before Dominion ships could even react. Communications arrays burned out in bursts of static. Command vessels, carefully protected within the fleet's core, suddenly found enemy frigates already inside their shields. Theruin gripped the edge of the dais, watching his fleet unravel before it had even fired in unity. "This is no battle," he whispered. "This is execution." Veyrak barked frantic orders, but the humans were everywhere at once. Automated drones swarmed from concealed carriers, each one armed with adaptive AI that learned within seconds how to breach Dominion defenses. Laser fire cut through hulls at impossible angles, guided by targeting systems that seemed to predict every evasive maneuver. In the chaos, Theruin forced his voice steady. "Hold discipline. Do not scatter. Anchor to my command." But even as he spoke, his screens showed the inevitable. Ships peeling away in panic, formations collapsing under invisible pressure. The Dominion, proud architects of order, now drowned in their own disarray. Rourke's face remained expressionless as he watched the enemy fracture. He did not celebrate. Every destroyed vessel was a necessity, not a victory. "Cut the throat," he said evenly. His staff relayed the order. Human cruisers blinked across the battlefield, emerging from wormholes already aligned with the Dominion's command chain. Admirals who had laughed at Theruin in council found themselves staring at silent human vessels on their view screens before being erased in flashes of white. Within minutes, the grandest armada of the Dominion became a graveyard of drifting metal. Explosions painted the void in brief, terrible blossoms. Wreckage spun silently, carrying the last fragments of arrogance into the dark. Theruin's flagship shuddered under impact. Systems screamed across the bridge, smoke curling from ruptured panels. Veyrak staggered, eyes wild. "We must retreat." "There is nowhere to retreat," Theruin answered, yet his voice lacked despair. In that moment, watching humanity carve through his empire's pride, he felt something almost like relief. His warnings had been true, and the truth was here for all to see. The calm officer turned, trembling. "Admiral, they are hailing us." Theruin straightened. On screen, the image resolved into Admiral Rourke, calm as ever, his uniform plain, his expression unreadable. Around him, no celebration, no triumph. Only stillness. "Admiral Theruin," Rourke said, his voice low, deliberate. "Your fleets are broken. Your empire stands on the edge of collapse. We did not seek this war, but you left us no choice. Lay down your arms. Live. Or continue and be erased." The bridge of the Kalatha's Fong was silent but for the crackle of failing circuits. Veyrak hissed in fury, spitting words of defiance, but Theruin raised a hand and silenced him. He studied the human's face, saw no malice there, no hunger. Only resolve carved from grief and duty. It was more terrifying than hatred could ever be. He lowered his gaze, the gesture heavy with the weight of surrender. "I will yield," he said quietly. "Not for the Dominion, but for those who remain within it. Enough blood has fed the void." Rourke inclined his head once. "Then you understand what your council would not. We are not predators by nature. But when forced, we do not stop halfway." The transmission cut, and in its absence Theroin felt a hollow ache. Yet mingled with it was strange clarity. Humanity had spared him, not out of weakness, but choice. That choice was power beyond anything the Dominion had ever wielded. In Earth's command vessel, Rourke turned from the screen. Around him, his officers waited, expecting orders of pursuit, of conquest. Instead, he said only, "Cease fire. Secure survivors. Begin negotiations." There was no cheer, no triumph. The war had ended not with a roar of glory, but with the quiet inevitability of a scalpel cutting to the bone. Humanity had revealed its hand, and the galaxy would never be the same. Theroin stood amidst the wreckage of his bridge, shoulders heavy, but for the first time in his long career, his arrogance stripped away. He thought of the human's history he had studied, the images of endless wars, the scars carried like banners. They had not merely survived those storms, they had become them. He closed his eyes and whispered, half to himself, half to the stars that still burned indifferent above the carnage. "We thought them prey. We were wrong. They are the tide." And across the void, in the quiet aftermath of devastation, humanity prepared not for celebration, but for what came next.